I remember the evening I finally understood why I was losing. My daughter was 4 years old. It was just past 8 o'clock, and we were already deep into our third negotiation of the night. 5 more minutes of play, she said, then a glass of water. Then the request I remember most clearly. Could the nightlight please stay on, just this once, just a little? I kept saying yes to each small thing, certain that flexibility was kindness, that meeting her where she was in each moment was what thoughtful parenting meant. I was patient, I was present, and every single night still ended the same way, both of us exhausted, a little depleted, and neither of us quite knowing how to stop the thing that was happening between us. What I didn't understand then, and what took months of reading to find, is that I had the whole situation backwards. The calm I was searching for wasn't waiting on the other side of more negotiation, it was on the other side of less. By the end of this video, you'll understand one French concept so quietly effective, it sounds almost too simple to be real. You'll see the developmental research behind it, and you'll have 3 specific things you can put in place tonight. Not a new system to learn, not a whole philosophy to adopt, just a frame. The French call it le cadre. I first came across the phrase in the work of Aldo Naouri, a French pediatrician who spent 4 decades in clinical practice watching what actually happens inside French households. Naouri's interest was a pattern he kept observing. French children tended to settle earlier, resist bedtime less, and engage in fewer prolonged power struggles than children in comparable households elsewhere. He was careful not to claim that French parents were simply stricter. Many French homes are, inside the texture of daily life, remarkably free in how they treat children's time, choices, and play. The difference, Naouri argued, was structural. It was the architecture of the few firm limits they held, and the quality of settled certainty he called la tranquillité de la règle, the tranquility of the rule with which those limits were kept. Le cadre means literally the frame, not a fence, not something built to keep someone out. A frame, the kind that surrounds a painting and defines its edges so that everything inside can be fully seen and fully occupied. When French parents talk about le cadre, they mean a small number of non-negotiable anchors in a child's day. 3, maybe 4, bedtime, the shared family meal. 1, consistent refusal, moments that do not move, do not bend, and are not placed on the table for discussion. Everything inside that frame is genuinely, freely the child's. Picture a French apartment at 7 in the evening. The light is going amber in the kitchen. A parent is setting the table without rushing, not because the child is already in bed, but because the child is still playing freely in the next room, completely absorbed, aware somewhere that the meal is coming. No one is counting down. No one is reminding. The rhythm of the evening is simply already known. The cadre is not visible in that scene. It is the scene. The psychological mechanism beneath le cadre is worth understanding carefully, because once you see it clearly, a child's bedtime resistance starts to look very different from what we usually assume. Donald Winnicott, the British pediatrician and psychoanalyst, whose clinical observations reshaped developmental psychology through the mid-20th century, described what he called the holding environment. His central insight was that young children don't primarily need freedom. They need to feel held. Not physically restrained, but psychologically contained by something reliable enough that the nervous system can finally relax its search. When the environment around a child is unpredictable, the brain does exactly what brains do under genuine uncertainty. It scans, it tests. Where is the wall? How far before something stops me? That scanning is exhausting work. It produces precisely the behavior we call bedtime resistance. A child who keeps returning, who asks for one more thing, who finds each new small request with unerring accuracy. Not because the child wants to stay up, because the child is trying to locate the limit of the day, and the limit keeps appearing in a different place. I spent a long time believing I was dealing with a child who simply had too much energy in the evenings. I tried adjusting the afternoon schedule, adding more outdoor time, dimming the lights earlier. All of those things helped at the margins. But the core dynamic didn't shift, because the thing I hadn't changed was the thing that needed changing. I stopped negotiating the anchor. What I found in Naouri's case notes, and later confirmed in a much broader body of research, is that the testing behavior isn't a reflection of the child's energy at all. It's a reflection of the architecture of the day. A child living inside a consistent cadre typically stops testing the bedtime anchor within 2 to 4 weeks, not because they've given up, but because they've found the wall. And once you find a wall, you stop walking into it. What fills the space that the testing used to occupy is something much quieter and more interesting to watch. Absorbed, unhurried play. A child who isn't spending their remaining energy scanning for edges, A 2018 meta-analysis published in Sleep Medicine Reviews examined bedtime routines across more than 40,000 children under 10 years old. Children in households with consistent non-negotiable bedtime routines showed measurably lower cortisol levels at sleep onset, fewer night wakings, and significantly lower rates of parental-reported bedtime resistance. The critical variable wasn't the strictness of the household. It was the reliability of the anchor. The wall had to be in the same place every single night. The French word that surfaced again and again in everything I read about how le cadre works in daily practice is doucement. Gently. It names the quality of voice in which the anchors are delivered, not sharp, not apologetic, not carrying the slightly braced quality of a parent who is already anticipating the argument. Doucement c'est l'heure, gently it's time. Said the way you'd say it's raining outside. Not as a position to defend, not as a request awaiting assent, just the nature of the moment, delivered by someone who is completely at rest inside their own certainty. This matters more than it sounds. A study on parental vocal tone conducted at the University of Amsterdam found that children under 7 read hesitation in a parent's voice as a signal that the limit is movable, and respond accordingly, with escalated testing. The words and the tone carry different information, and children process both simultaneously. A parent who says it's bedtime while internally preparing for the pushback communicates something the child reads before the sentence is finished. A parent who says it's bedtime with the same quality of voice they'd use to say the sun is going down communicates something entirely different. Doucement is not a soft word. It is a certain one. There is a nuance that gets lost when people encounter le cadre for the first time, and it's the part that makes it something more than a strategy for difficult evenings. The cadre is not the whole day. It is only the edges of the day. Inside those 3 or 4 firm anchors, French children have genuine, substantial freedom. They choose how to spend the afternoon, how slowly to work through the Cadre, what to play, what to invent, how to occupy the hours that are fully theirs. The cadre doesn't fill the child's day with rules. It defines the shape of the day so that everything inside can be truly open. The child who stops spending mental energy locating the walls starts spending that energy playing, deeply, with full absorption, without the low-level vigilance that comes from not quite knowing where the limits are. The researcher Suzanne Garon, writing on French early childhood pedagogy, described this as autonomy created by containment, a phrase that sounds paradoxical until you've watched it working in an actual household. What this tells us about how we've been thinking about family structure is worth sitting with, honestly. We are a generation of parents with more information about child development than any generation before us, and yet bedtime struggles are, if anything, more prevalent and more prolonged than they were a generation ago. The data from Naouri's clinical work and the developmental research following Winnicott and those 40,000 children in the Sleep Medicine Reviews analysis all point in a consistent direction. Information without a clear, calm structure to hold it produces something worse than no information at all. It produces a very well-meaning, very exhausted improvisation every evening. I want to say something here that I know sits against a strong current in contemporary parenting culture. The idea that constant, respectful negotiation of every limit is always the most child-centered approach. That more conversation automatically means more respect for the child. I think this conflation is quietly producing a great deal of bedtime tension for families who are genuinely trying hard. Naouri's clinical work and the developmental research following Winnicott point consistently to the same place. Children don't need all limits to be conversations. They need a small number of limits that are simply the nature of the day, held by a calm adult who has already decided, and they need everything else to be genuinely, freely theirs. Holding the frame firmly is not the opposite of respect. It may be one of its clearest expressions. Here is something I'm genuinely curious about from your own experience. When your child pushes at the end of the day, does it feel like a child who wants more time, or does it feel like a child searching for where the day ends? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I find that when parents sit with that question carefully, most of them already know which one it is. Building your own cadre takes more thought than effort, and the thought is worth taking seriously. The first step is choosing your anchors. Not rules, anchors, 3 or 4 moments that define the shape of your family's day and do not move. Most families find these naturally include a consistent wake time, a shared evening meal, and a bedtime. One firm no. No screens past a particular hour. No eating between the afternoon gouter and dinner can be the fourth if it fits your household. What matters is that these are chosen deliberately, in advance, and that you've already decided they are not offered for renegotiation. They are the edges of the day. Everything inside them belongs to the child. The second step is making the anchors visible through small, consistent ritual. In French households, this happens through repeated signals that arrive before the anchor itself. The table set the same way, the bath at the same hour, the lamp dimmed in the same corner of the room, and the word doucement arriving like a change in the light rather than an announcement. Nothing elaborate, just the same things in the same order, carried by the same quality of calm. Researchers at the Université de Paris Descartes, in a 2015 longitudinal study of toddler sleep behavior, found that children inside consistent evening ritual sequences could predict the end of the day themselves by around age 3. They began winding down spontaneously before any announcement, because the rhythm had become internal. The anchor no longer needed to be declared. It arrived. The third step is the hardest for most parents, and the most important. Holding the anchor without negotiating it, not without warmth. Warmth is present everywhere. But the anchor itself is not discussed. Doucement, c'est l'heure, and that is the end of the conversation. What you find over the following 2 to 4 weeks is that the testing gradually stops. The child has found the wall. It is gentle and permanent and always in exactly the same place. It stops being interesting to test. It becomes instead the reliable edge of a world they can explore freely. There is one detail from Naouri's clinical observations that stayed with me long after I had finished reading. Children raised inside a consistent cadre tended, in his records, to be more adventurous during free play, not less. They tried harder things, persisted longer at difficult tasks, and showed less anxious monitoring of the adult across the room. Winnicott had predicted this decades earlier. The held child plays, the uncertain child watches the door. Le cadre is a small idea with a quietly large effect. You don't need more structure in your family's life. You need less, held more firmly, held more calmly. 3 anchors for the shape of the day, held with doucement, create a space wide enough for a child to grow freely inside. The wall at the edge of the evening is not what limits a childhood. It is what makes it safe to fully inhabit one. If you know a parent who is patient and present, and still ending every night a little depleted, share this with them. Sometimes the simplest reframes carry the most. And right here on this channel there is a video about la pause, the French practice of deliberately waiting 10 seconds before responding to a child in distress, and the research behind why that pause changes everything that follows. It has become one of the most shared videos we have made. I think it will make a gentle kind of sense right after this one.